Folks, this episode may contain language that some may find triggering. We have listed resources below for any of the topics discussed, but just wanted to give you a heads up that the themes and some of the pieces that are mentioned in this episode are physical and sexual abuse, along with mental health. So if any of these things are triggering to you, please do be warned before you tune into this episode. And if you need any resources, they are shared below.
I'd actually been warned 3 times that my life was in danger with regards to the work on the ivory trade, because the same cartels that do ivory do drugs, guns, and human trafficking. And I became too loud a voice, speaking on too big a platform.
My name is Mark Brand. You are listening to Better. I'm a social impact entrepreneur, so I build businesses that are in service to the greater community. So Better was formed to be a tool for everyday advocacy. I think anytime we take people's attention, we have to give something. Folks, welcome back to Better. As you know, I scour my networks and my friend circles and friends of friend circles to find the people who best embody what the show is about, which is tools for resilience. And my guest today, Nadya, has so much of that. And I think some things that we can also relate to with interdisciplinary work. I believe that in this time, we need to lean into being polymaths. We need to lean into not being the job we were prescribed, but the jobs that we really care deeply about. And in this episode, we'll definitely get into that. Nadya took a hugely successful position in media and broadcast, being named one of the 20 most influential people in her region by CNN. She's graced the covers of Elle and also been one of Elle's most influential. And the list literally goes ad nauseum. I would take the entire episode to talk about it, but then pivoted that into Let Elephants Be Elephants, a campaign to raise awareness about elephant conservation and reduce the demand for ivory in Asia. And in her own words, her goal was to fight to save the world's remaining elephants from ivory poachers and habitat loss. And that's how I got to know her, through a keynote at a conference that we were both speakers at multiple years, known as C2. And C2 was very famous Sid Lee, the brand that nobody knows behind all the brands, and Cirque du Soleil got together and had a baby and put together this conference, or unconference, if you will, on the really cutting edge of impact, digital technologies, and then world leadership. So it was my pleasure to meet her there, and we've stayed connected ever since. And I've wanted to have you on the show since season 1. So thank you for being here. And the question I always ask my guests right off the hop is, that's me introducing you, but I would love to hear how you now introduce yourself.
How would I describe myself now? A multitasking mama. And it's interesting that you say polymath, because in the last 2 weeks, 2 other people have called me a polymath. And I think, I think it's just the way of the time, of these times, right? You have to be able to sort of be agile and forward thinking and solution focused and responding to what's the greatest need in the world at this time. So I am still very much driven by impact, and sustainability obviously will always be at the heart of everything that I do, because it's part of my DNA. But I recognized about 10 years ago that unless people are well within themselves, they can't be a part of sustainable change. So I've gone from speaking about the environment and the importance of looking after the environment to the importance of looking after ourselves.
It's a beautiful frame.
To be
and
a part of
I'm going to take
change.
us all the way there, because I think it's your jobs, your initial jobs, we know nothing about you as a human being, right? We only see you. You are only just literally visible to us. And then we start to know you as a personality as you're holding space on television, and like getting to meet all of these people. And then there's only 2 forks in the road from those careers. There's one where people sort of ride off into the sunset and you never hear from them again, and they're replaced and somebody else comes up and blossoms in their place. Or the second one is they lean into those giant circles of influence, which you have, and they do so for causality. And when I was thinking about this earlier, the pivot in my own personal career, but so many people I know of influence who then stand out on a cause, they run the risk of career suicide. It's I'm going to step out on this thing you don't know me for. You didn't sign up for this. Will you take this journey with me? So what was that for you moving into impact? there's also a moment of like sincerity of like, how is that going to go? What was that journey from personality, truly like giant media personality, into that same, I'm still me, but I care about these things? What was that like for you?
Well, I think the transition for me was not so difficult, nor for my audience, because when I first started on MTV, which is I was one of the pioneer VJs on MTV Asia, and we broadcast to homes all across Asia, and that was 1995, and already when I was on MTV, I was already talking about the things that I cared about. So when MTV first launched in Asia, we were pioneering. The producers were pioneering. The VJs were. Nobody knew what they were exactly doing. We were not following a template. We were just kind of doing our thing, and that allowed for a lot of freedom. And basically, I didn't really work with the script. I kind of was like, okay, this is the track that I'm coming back from, and this is the video that I'm going to introduce, and in between I'm free to go wild, right? And we just talked about and did wild and crazy things. But, you know, oftentimes I was like, oh, it's the International Year of the Ocean, or reduce, reuse, recycle, or did you know that there's these orangutans, and that's actually where I'm from. I'm from Sumatra, and we've got, orangutans there, or, whatever it was. And then one of my fellow VJs at the time, he came up to me one day and he said, Nats, my cousin gave away half of his life savings to the orangutans because of you.
Wow.
And then we had this really cool show called MTV's Most Wanted, where um, it was a request show, right? And obviously back in the 90s, we didn't have so much email. We were like just about, the internet was just about to sort of come into action. And so people would send in physical, like giant cards, and they're coming from all over Asia. I don't know how they got there, giant cards and really creative things, and faxes and voicemails, and, all of this. Like, our whole set was populated with these amazing requests that were super artistic. And because these are the messages that I was constantly talking about, and you would win request of the day, people wised up to the fact that if they put anything on their message about the environment or about a message that I cared about, they would win request of the day.
Amazing.
Right. So it started to spread that way. And so it was just like, yeah, okay, this is the thing. This is what Nats does. And so there hasn't been a huge kind of, like you say, that fork in the road for me externally, because that's where I've always been.
When you're waking up every day and your job is also to be in entertainment, and you've got these pieces, it's beautiful that they allowed you the freedom, the artistic freedom, to be an advocate. And in that advocacy, also to see, like your example with us, such huge, like, oh, this really affected me or impacted me, because we use that qualitative data to continue to say, hey, by the way, what I do in between matters to the network. It also matters to ratings, and it also matters to my viewers a lot. So we can continue to do it. I can't even imagine a world in which we're allowed to do that, 20-ish years later, in a way that we can really platform ourselves, unless the platform itself is for that. There feels like there's such a delineation between what you're allowed to speak about and what's comfortable for people, because of the divisive nature of where we are, particularly in the Western world.
Yeah.
So what was it like to change from getting up every day to be in that system, to like getting up every day to fight for the causality? And how did you choose specifically the cause that you landed on?
I think as a kid, I was always rescuing. I was always rescuing and bringing home animals. Um, Much to my mum's dismay, I would bring I would just bring home all the animals off the street and bring them home, at the very least, wash them, feed them, and then sort of let them go. And then I end up with like poo all over the bathroom sink and scratches all up my arms, like whatever, right? So it has always been in my nature to sort of rescue and save animals. Um, and then I was just, I guess, looking for the right sort of opportunity and outlet and avenue and partnership, I guess, all along. Um, and then, I was actually first. Um, I first joined the UN family as a UN Great Apes ambassador, because um, I first spoke about orangutans in 1996, I think, at a conference in Singapore. And the reason I spoke about orangutans is because I'm Indigenous Indonesian on my father's side and white Australian on my mother's side. And my mother spent time in Indonesia before I was born. And she told me stories of the times that she rescued two orangutans that had been stolen from the zoo, Michael and Ollie. And so I had these stories of orangutans growing up, and she would tell me all of these stories. Um, and then knowing that as I kind of grew up and grew into a platform, I was like, well, this is what I need to talk about. I need to talk about orangutans because that's where I'm from, and they're my, if anyone's going to talk about these species, it should be me, right? I've got this platform, all that kind of stuff. So it started with the Sumatran orangutan. And then I met, years later, I met a woman at a Christmas party, and she was talking to somebody else about rhinos and elephants, and a particular story about a particular rhino that these two people had known, and they had obviously seen recently. And then she said to this person, she said, "Do you remember that rhino that we saw?" And then she said, "It died." And then she looked, she was like this. And I was like, oh, why? She's like the dying is like, and like an amazing thing. And and then she said, "Do you know how it died?" And then he said, "No." And she said, "Of old age." And I was like,
Mm.
wow, wow, that's not a thing, right? And so then I said, tell me more. And I started to get really engaged in this conversation. And then she said to me, "Do you want to go to Africa?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to go." And she said, "Okay, let's go." And I said, "Okay, let's go." And then within a few months, we hatched a plan to go to Kenya to speak to the holy grail of the elephant world, and to really get an understanding of what's happening on the ground in Kenya with regards to the ivory trade.
The holy trinity of elephants. I need a definition for, and I feel like I should know, but what does that mean?
Oh, the holy grail of elephants?
The holy grail of elephants. There you go.
Yeah, it's
Me immediately. I took that to a cooking analogy. See, instantly, the chef in me would not allow it to be holy grail. I was like, nope, the holy trinity. So the holy grail of elephants is
the holy grail. It's basically the real heroes, like the true heroes who are working on the ground, either in conservation or in anti-poaching or in elephant science or in elephant husbandry or in running the orphanages. And so I grabbed my crew from Asia's Next Top Model season 1. And I'm like, "Guys, you want to come with me? Let's go. We're going to go and just do a recce. We'll just go and see what we can find out and see, if there's a story there." And so we went. It was just my head of crew and my producer and Tammy and I. And we went to Kenya, and we did meet the holy grail of the elephant world in Kenya, and learnt the severity of the situation. And initially we were like, "Oh, we'll just make some videos for YouTube." And when we got there and understood, we're like, this story is way beyond, way beyond just some videos for YouTube. So then we went on to produce a documentary for National Geographic, and an entire campaign for the Asian consumers, to tell the reality of the ivory trade. And our ultimate goal was to push for legislative change in Thailand, because there was a legal loophole in Thailand that allowed for domestic Thai ivory to be sold,
okay.
which just meant that the world's ivory was being laundered through Thailand.
Yeah, exactly right.
We ran the campaign. I ended up addressing the UN General Assembly. The country sponsor of that day was Thailand. We successfully changed legislation. And what was actually really beautiful was that it was a relatively simple fight. I don't want to use the word fight, but it was a relatively simple challenge to overcome, because 80% of Asian consumers didn't know that ivory comes from dead elephants.
Wow. Come now. No, hold on. 80% of people said they didn't know when surveyed, or like genuinely you believe that was the stat. Is that real?
Well, I think they genuinely believed, at least, yeah, because they thought that it was like a tooth that falls out. They thought it was something that,
Right.
that you can just cut off and it grows back. They thought it comes from
Sure.
dead temple elephants, because in Thailand there's a lot of elephants in the temples. So there was all of that kind of these stories, or this impression. And then once the education was done, people were like, no, I don't want, especially in Thailand, where the elephants are so revered. It's like the animal of the country. It's it's so of course they didn't want to be harming the elephants. um
Right.
yeah, so that was successful. A year later, after the campaign, I went back to all of the places that we filmed. We filmed both in Kenya and in Thailand. And all of the places that we filmed in Thailand originally no longer had ivory. I could not buy ivory on the streets. I couldn't find ivory on the
Ah.
streets. And then the number of elephants being killed in Kenya also uh, dropped dramatically.
Everybody's journey, which is how does this, and I always, when people say, I do this work, I say, why do you do this work? And of course, my first response forever defensively was because somebody has to. In fairness, your why is you went back to Thailand and things have changed. You went back to Kenya and things have changed. Like, I am 2 blocks off the downtown east side right now, the unceded Squamish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh Nations, otherwise known as Vancouver, BC, or the downtown east side. When I step on the blocks, it's worse. It's worse every day or every week. And so we don't get that positive almost reinforcement of, hey, what we're doing makes a difference. We have to look for it. But getting real, true positive reinforcement when a trope or a narrative is changed because of your platform is incredibly, like, just to know that people had this misinformation, right? So that's the classic trope for us, which is, people should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and they would get a job if they wanted one. We know how insane that is to even say out loud.
Yeah,
And I mean, we could just say mental health and leave it at that in
yeah.
defense. But in this instance, people genuinely not knowing because the internet is not fully in play in your case yet. And people thinking like, oh, people are inherently good. This would not be a thing. And you being able to share that message so deeply and properly using all the skills and tools that you had learned and been a part of and that your network was adjacent to is so, so epic. Like, genuinely, in the proper use of the word.
Thank you, thank you for recognizing and calling that out, Mark. And I deeply appreciate that. And at the same time, elephants is one thing, the environment is another. I'm sure we're going to get to this at some point, so I will leave it. But they're you know elephants is one thing, but the sustainability and the environment is another, and those goalposts keep shifting. And
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to go there now, and I'm going to set us up for success here, because what the centering care, or what it might look like the postcard is for people who are environmentalists, advocates, people would say my signature cause right up until the last couple of years would be homelessness, right? They would be like, hey, Mark advocates, and Mark advocates for homelessness. No, I don't. Homelessness doesn't exist if poverty doesn't exist. And so when you find yourself in the system, you start to work your way up the ladder. And how we hope to bring people to causality is through something that they can do themselves, right? So in your case, stay away from the sale of ivory, and also make sure to educate your friend circles and all your nodes of contagion. For me, it's really like understanding hunger and why we're here and why 1 in 4 Canadians currently is starving. Like that's a number that's unacceptable to people. And they're like, wait a second, I know that I've been food insecure, because 25% of people have. They can attach to that. Now, homelessness is adjacent. It's just over here in the Venn diagram, which is if you can't afford food, maybe you can't afford rent. And then all of those things are actually the same thing. And so you get to that place. In your instance, the environment is such a huge lever, and in mine, like in all the work that we do, the environment is like water. It's like air, literally, but also figuratively, right? It is the leading causality to a lot of the issues that we're facing at this point. So I would like to go to 2018. Where do these two things intersect? Because we're yelling them from different stages and different tents at the same time, under different monikers, to try and invite people to join the cause. And it's what drew me to yours. So please, the floor is yours.
That was the year that I helped the United Nations to launch the Global Environment Outlook, which is a document, their latest scientific document on the state of the planet. And it was like a massive old school 80s phone book for an entire, country, whatever, right? Like giant and full of deep science and scientific jargon. And I'm there on stage at the UN Environment Assembly in Nairobi with the world's top scientists who have all prepared this document. And I think I can't remember who was the SecGen at the time. I don't remember if it was Ban Ki-moon or Antonio Guterres. But they had just said the year before, we've got 12 years to turn the ship around. And I was sitting with these scientists, and before our mics were on, they were like, we don't have 12 years. We barely have a year to do this. We've got a year, if that. And I was like, we have a year, and this is what we're giving people?
Mm.
Who is going to read this? Who is going to understand this? Who is going to translate this? Who is going to disseminate this? Who is going to run with this? How do we take the language of science and urgency and devastation and put it into the hearts and hands and minds of those who will actually make change in a year?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I was like, that was the first thing. And I was just like, what? And, all this while I'm thinking to myself, I've been at this since 1996. What has changed positively? What has changed? Right.
Right.
So that was already this little voice in the back of my head, and then, I read a book by a guy named David Wallace
Mm-hmm.
Wells called The Uninhabitable Earth. And that book is a book that I recommend that everybody read, but do so when you are well-resourced and feeling well within yourself, because it is incredibly sobering and very depressing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the second thing that happened, and I was just like, again, what have I been doing with my life? Like, what have I been doing with my life? Have I just wasted my entire life's work, yelling from these platforms and trying to think of creative ways to get people to move and into action? And we're none the better. And then I spoke at World Economic Forum. And I actually didn't think I was going to get a visa because, the forum is held both in Davos and also in China. And being an environmentalist in the media, a longtime supporter of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I was like, I'm not going to get a visa for China. Like
Certainly.
there's no chance they're going to let me in, right? But because of the power of the forum, obviously I got my visa. And it was, I have to be careful here because, it was at that time that I was also lending my voice to another project that was coming up against a huge China-backed project. It was a species-specific project that I was supporting and lending my voice to, that was very, very close to my home because it's from my village. And there's a China-backed project going in there. And anyone who was working on that project at that time was getting death threats to stop speaking about them. So anyway, I went, and I sometimes do the bimbo, like I'm like, we've just, seen this amazing screening of all of these incredible, animals in these diversely rich, biodiverse places that are left on the earth, but they're so rare. And guess what? That was an orangutan that's from my village. And it's so sad,
Mm-hmm.
now there's a China back dam going in there, and, I give it as a throwaway, And so then where you're super super protected. Like you have to go only this place and only this place while you're there, or at least for me. And we kind of went off the areas where we were supposed to go, and literally fully clothed policeman would follow me around with a camera, making sure
Surveying every move.
making sure I know that I'm being followed. So it was just like there were just so many things. Like all of this work that I've done hasn't made a difference. And when I want to do the work, I can't even talk about it because of all the death threats.
Sure.
And even prior to China, I'd actually been warned 3 times that my life was in danger with regards to the work on the ivory trade, because the same cartels that do ivory do drugs, guns, and human trafficking. And I became too loud a voice, speaking on too big a platform. And so I actually had to step back. I stepped back from that work. But like you said earlier, Mark, there was already the success. We had already won in a space. So I didn't feel so bad removing myself, but I just had to be very careful. I'm a mother of 3, so I needed to sort of shift my my focus.
Yeah, and I think you bring it into a place that I was going to take it a little bit later. How we show up every day in advocacy, even though things aren't getting better visibly. I stand on the shoulders of advocates who had it much, much worse, and vice versa. And it just goes forever, right? We have to be conscious enough to understand that we are simultaneously reaching down and reaching up, or reaching down to those who are going to come after you and I and everybody else in our work. And, we're reaching up to those who still, the Dr. Jane Goodalls of the world, the Sir Richard Attenboroughs of the world, our friend Dr. Sylvia Earles of the world, who've held these mantles for so long, who can share so much about how to be with ourselves amongst these crises. So I ask you how you manage as a mother, how you manage internally, and how you balance these things out with, wanting to run towards the fire.
Okay, so it'll go back to 2018 again, and as a result of everything that I went through in 2018, it was the first time that I hit a wall, and I became quite depressed, and it was hard. It was really really hard. It was the first time I think in my life that I was properly depressed, that I could recognize, you know what I mean? And I have been through a lot in my life. And just to quickly drop a little nugget here, and it might be a conversation for another time, but every form of trauma, every form of abuse that a person can experience, I've experienced. I've been kidnapped, I've been raped, I've been I left Australia under police escort with a 1-year-old kid and $200 to my name, and landed in Singapore in 1995. I have had a broken nose, fractured ribs, psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all of them, neglect. Left home, left school, left Australia, started working when I was 12 years old. So I've had a lot. This body and this mind has experienced a lot in life, and yet it was at that point in 2018 that I was actually properly depressed, and because of the state of the planet and despair. So it was big. It was really big, and then I was like, well, you know what? I've been practicing and studying and facilitating classes on Tibetan Buddhism for 18 years maybe. And that is all about the mind and transformation of the mind, and looking at, changing the way that we perceive things, and understanding there's different truths, and meditation and calming the body and nervous system and all of these things. And I had that theoretical knowledge, some theoretical knowledge that I hadn't fully applied and embodied yet. And I realized at that point that the embodiment was what was so critical. And also that mental health comes before anything else. And so I had to really work hard on my own mental health before I could continue doing any other work. And I did some of the work, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Um, I think it's roughly about 3 or 4 years ago, I dropped off the radar, and that was because I had a really significant health scare with my heart. I thought I was having a heart attack, and it was my heart was spasming. It's called coronary vasospasm, and it was a stress response to something that happened in my um, in my life. And so, for the last since then, I kind of was on a long sabbatical for about 3 years, doing very deep work. Yeah, it's been a really deep, hard, very, very hard, um, hugely growth enhancing, kind of like cracking, like breaking down of so many things and opening up to so many more things. Few years, it's been huge.
As we come to the end of the show, which I can't believe we did that, and you have to come back and spend more time with us. But as you are in this iteration, and you've taken us on a little bit of the journey getting here, if you could tell anyone anything about all of that I've just shared and what you've shared, and they could take away some tools for themselves today, tomorrow, this year, what would those tools be?
I think that all of us, we all inherently have the healer and the change maker within us. And to be a sustainable agent of change in this world, which I think everybody should be empowered to be, because you can be an agent of change as a housewife. You can be an agent of change as a secretary. You can be an agent of change no matter who you are, where you are, what platform you do or don't have, because you will always influence somebody, right? So to be an empowered and sustainable change maker, the most important thing is the tools of inner resilience and being well resourced within, and have those tools to be able to know when to step away, and to know that you can step away. Like I've taken a big 3 years, and that's okay, because the world changes so rapidly. Who are we to sort of think that whatever tools we have right now are the tools that we need for always going forward? Those tools need to change too, and that takes stepping away. That takes stepping away and rediscovering and remembering and reconnecting to the tools that we have access to best suit the times that we're in. So if you are also an active change maker, or a long time person of impact, whether it's environmental or societal impact, my advice is to mentor somebody. And you need to tag team. You need to say, dude, I'm taking 6 months off, and that the work will continue, and you guys can take turns, right? Of course there will be sort of handover stuff that you need to perfect, but you need to know that it's not just me that's out there and fighting the so-called good fight, right? We need to partner, we need to collaborate, we need to come together, we need to share, we need to be open, we need to gather and hold hands, and make space for messiness too, make space for saying it's effing hard right now what I'm trying to do, and I don't think I can do it alone, and that's okay.
Beautiful advice. Everything that you shared today is so powerful, as I knew it would be. And I'm really excited to have you back. I think most of the time when we're listening to these shows, it's somebody has got a book, which is often the case because people that I know are brilliant and write books, and they should, so we can all read them. We're very excited for yours when it comes, and we will certainly have you here for it. But also, it's just nice to have a friend on the show to be able to share the journey, and be at a rest stop in the journey. Seeing you drop off for a while, I did a friend check, I did a quality check. I was like, hey, are you good? Are you okay? Because when we step away from socials, our friends do, they get concerned. And I think making that okay, and then also, as you have been doing, really sharing how that's okay and also how it feels, right? There's not enough of the messiness. So I appreciate you and the ways that you show up very much. And I also just really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and get with the audience here at Better. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we say goodbye for this time?
No, just my deep, deep gratitude for you and the work that you do and the platform that you've created and the outreach that you have and your passion and your vibrancy and your intellect and the way that you move in the world and the hearts and minds that you shift. I'm super grateful I'm super, super grateful for the work that you do.
Well, I echo that reciprocally, and am really excited to continue to keep this thread going, both publicly and personally, of course, as always. And my very best to your friends and your family close. Folks, you've been listening to Better. My dear friend Nadya, all of her information in the bios below, and where you can follow, where you can check in. You are going to enjoy the journey even deeper out there. There's so much to connect to. And as always, we appreciate your time, your intention for being here, and your attention to the show. Share and amplify wherever you feel is appropriate. You've been on Better. We'll see you very soon.